She used my money for her wedding, then banned me from it. But she forgot. Every page of her life was written in my ink, and I'm about to write the last one. The music drifted over the iron gates, the soft melody of a string quartet. I had picked the song myself, a small, perfect detail. The guard didn't meet my eyes. He just held up the clipboard. My own driver's license photo stared back, grainy and impersonal, beneath 2 words typed in a cold black font. Do not admit. I stood. I breathed. I did not speak. My heart didn't break. It simply froze in my chest. She planned every detail for her perfect wedding. I was the one detail she chose to erase. I turned away from the laughter. The silk of my gown suddenly felt heavy, less like a celebration and more like a shroud. The drive home from Carmel Valley was silent. The engine hummed a low, mournful tune against the darkening highway. My hands gripped the leather steering wheel, the knuckles white. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need any more noise. The silence was a cavern, and my memories were the echoes bouncing off its walls, each one sharper than the last. I drove. I stared. I remembered. The first memory that came was of gravel, sharp gray gravel digging into a 5-year-old's knee. Lydia had been trying to ride her first 2-wheeler down our sloping driveway, a blur of pink ribbons and fierce determination. Then came the inevitable wobble, the cry of surprise, and the scraped skin. I ran from the porch, my heart in my throat. I knelt on the hard ground, my own knees aching, and gently cleaned the wound. I remember the single perfect tear that traced a path through the dirt on her cheek as she looked up at me, her lower lip trembling. Will it leave a scar, Mama? She had whispered, her voice tiny. I looked into those wide, trusting eyes, the same eyes I had fallen in love with the day I first held her. Every scar tells a story, I told her, my voice steady as I applied the Band-Aid. A story of a battle you won. She seemed to like that. A story. It was always about the story we told ourselves. I gave her my life. She just wanted my signature. Another memory surfaced years later. The shrill ping of an email notification in the quiet of our kitchen. We were making pasta from scratch, flour dusting our clothes like soft snow. It was March of her senior year. She wiped her hands on her apron, her movements tense with anticipation, and clicked open the laptop. A gasp. A scream of pure, unadulterated joy. Berkeley, I got in. Oh my God, I got in. She launched herself into my arms, lifting me off the floor in a fierce hug, laughing and crying all at once. I felt a surge of pride so powerful, it almost brought me to my knees. We had done it. She had done it, but I had been there, holding the flashlight during late-night study sessions, proofreading the essays, brewing the endless cups of coffee. That night, after she had called everyone she knew, I sat alone at my desk and quietly paid the first tuition deposit from my life savings. It was the easiest check I had ever written. Have you ever loved someone so much you simply failed to see who they truly were until it was too late? I was her mother. Now I was just her bank. The silence in the car deepened, pressing in on me. But the memories weren't all warm. One, in particular, now felt cold, sharp. It was her 21st birthday. I had taken her to that expensive rooftop restaurant downtown, the kind with city lights that sparkle below like a fallen constellation. I wanted it to be special, memorable. After dinner, I slid a long velvet box across the table. She opened it carefully. Inside, nestled in satin, was a Mont Blanc fountain pen, black resin, platinum trim, a thing of beauty and substance. It's for your future, I had told her, my voice thick with emotion, so you can sign big deals, conquer the world, write your own story. She had looked up, her eyes gleaming in the candlelight. But it was a different kind of gleam than the one I saw on the day she got into Berkeley. It wasn't joy. It was appraisal. She picked up the pen, not with sentiment, but with a calculated grace. She didn't comment on its beauty or thank me for the thought behind it. Instead, she traced the white star emblem on the cap with her thumb. "The Wall Street men all use these," she'd said, a strange, hungry smile playing on her lips. "It's a power pen." At the time, I thought it was just ambition, the healthy, driving ambition I had always encouraged. Now, I saw it for what it was. She didn't see a gift from her mother. She saw a tool. She didn't hear a message of love. She heard the sound of a door to a wealthier world unlocking. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as the memory faded. The warmth of the past was gone, replaced by a chilling clarity. The girl with the scraped knee, the student screaming with joy, the young woman appraising her gift. They were all the same person. I just hadn't been willing to see it. She loved what the pen could do, not who it came from. The click of my front door closing was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It echoed in the cavernous silence of the foyer, a sound of finality, a full stop. The house smelled the same, of lemon polish and old books and the faint scent of the gardenias by the window. But it felt alien, like a perfect replica of a life that was no longer mine. I walked through the rooms, my fingers trailing over the cool surfaces of furniture we had picked out together. The photos on the mantelpiece seemed to mock me, their smiling faces frozen in a time I no longer believed in. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a museum of a beautiful lie. How do you mourn a love that you now suspect was never real to begin with? You don't. You erase it. That night, my grief became a quiet, methodical fury. I started in the living room. I pulled the heavy photo albums from the shelves. I opened the first one. Lydia, age 7, missing her 2 front teeth, grinning on a swing I had pushed. I felt nothing, just a cold, hollow space where a memory used to be. I closed the album. I packed it in a cardboard box. I taped the box shut. 3 simple actions to bury a decade. I worked for hours. Each photo, each report card, each ridiculous piece of art from kindergarten, a lopsided clay bird, a crayon drawing titled "My Mommy," went into the boxes. I was an archaeologist digging up the ruins of my own heart, cataloging the artifacts of my own foolishness. The work was mechanical, numbing. It was exactly what I needed. I wanted to feel nothing at all. This wasn't a last-minute betrayal. It wasn't a mistake. It was a transaction. By midnight, I reached the old secretary desk in the corner, the one where I kept all her important papers. School records, medical forms, her birth certificate. My original plan was to shred everything. A bonfire of the past. As I pulled out a thick manila envelope labeled Lydia College Docs, my hand slipped. The contents fanned out across the hardwood floor. Transcripts, scholarship letters, old FAFSA forms, a paper trail of a future I had so proudly funded. I sighed, annoyed at the mess. I knelt, my knees cracking in the silence, and began to shove the papers back into the envelope. Just another chore, another piece of the past to bury. But then my fingers brushed against a paper that felt different. It was thicker, heavier. Cream-colored cardstock, not cheap printer paper. I pulled it out. It was folded in thirds. I unfolded it. The embossed letterhead read, Carmel Valley Event Consultants. My breath caught. It was a receipt, an invoice for a non-refundable retainer for venue and planning services. The amount was staggering, 5 figures, but it wasn't the number that made the air leave my lungs. It was the date, printed neatly in the top right corner, October 26th of last year. My mind raced trying to place the date. It felt significant, but the memory was slippery. I stood up, the receipt clutched in my hand, and walked to the filing cabinet in my office. My movements were slow, deliberate. I opened the drawer labeled H. I pulled out the file for the Hartman Trust. My hands didn't shake. I found the bank statement for last October, and there it was, a final lump sum disbursement to Lydia's account. The date was October 25th, one day. I laid the 2 documents side by side under the desk lamp, the bank statement and the wedding receipt. The dates, the numbers, the truth, it was all there, in black and white. The ink she had used to build her perfect new life. My ink, the coldness in my chest sharpened. It wasn't despair anymore. It was something else, something harder, something useful. Grief is a fog, but clarity is a single, sharp point of light. The receipt and the bank statement lay side by side on my desk, two pieces of paper that had redrawn the map of my entire life. The despair that had hollowed me out for hours was gone, burned away by something colder, purer. Anger. A quiet, useful anger. I did not need to scream. Screaming was a release. I needed to build, to construct a response so precise, so devastating it would dismantle their carefully built fantasy brick by brick. They didn't want a guest, so I sent them a ghost. I opened my laptop. The soft blue light illuminated my face in the darkness of my study. My first search was not for lawyers. It was for him, Mr. Caldwell, Charles Caldwell, the man whose son was now married, in name at least, to my daughter. I bypassed the social pages, the wedding announcements. I went straight to the sources of power: Forbes, Bloomberg, the Wall Street Journal. The articles painted a picture of a corporate titan, a man who had built an empire from nothing. A man famous for two things: his unwavering loyalty to his own and his utter intolerance for liars. His public quotes were brutal. "I don't suffer fools," one headline read. "I bury them in the fine print." I read for an hour, maybe two. I analyzed his business deals, his acquisitions, his enemies. I built a psychological profile of the man who was, at this very moment, sipping champagne at a party paid for with my money. He wasn't just the groom's father. He was my new weapon. I could picture the scene at the vineyard perfectly. I had chosen the caterer, the florist, the string quartet. I knew the champagne would be Veuve Clicquot. I knew the laughter would be loud, the smiles bright and brittle. And I knew Charles Caldwell would be watching. Men like him don't attend parties. They scan them for weaknesses. He would have noticed the empty chair in the front row, the one with my name card that Monica, in her sloppy arrogance, must have forgotten to remove. An empty seat at the family table is a loose thread, a sign of a story untold. It would have bothered him, a wrinkle in the fabric, a flaw in the asset his son was acquiring. While he was noticing the loose threads, I was preparing the needle. I created a new email account, an anonymous, untraceable ghost in the machine. The username I chose was simple: Veritas awaits, truth awaits. The message itself had to be perfect. Not an accusation, but a seed of doubt. Not an emotional plea, but a cold, strategic nudge. I typed, deleted, and typed again, honing each word until it was a scalpel. It was short, 3 sentences, a whisper in a hurricane of noise. I took a breath. My finger hovered over the trackpad. I thought of Lydia's face, smiling as she held the Mont Blanc pen, a power pen. She was about to learn what real power was. It wasn't about holding the pen. It was about knowing where to aim the ink. I clicked send. Miles away, in the warm glow of the Carmel Valley evening, Charles Caldwell was watching Monica hold court. He watched her laugh a little too loudly, her hand fluttering on his son's arm a little too possessively. He was a man who understood leverage, and this woman reeked of it. His phone, resting on the table, vibrated discreetly. It was his personal assistant, a young man who knew never to interrupt him unless it was critical. The assistant leaned in, showing him the screen of his own device. Caldwell's eyes scanned the message, his expression unchanging. From Veritas awaits at proton.me. Subject, a question for the host. A ghost is paying for this wedding. Check the seating chart for the mother of the bride. Then check the Harper Trust Fund. Charles Caldwell finished his whiskey in one slow, deliberate swallow. He placed the empty glass down with a soft click. His gaze lifted, sweeping past the smiling bride, past his own son. He looked directly at the single empty chair in the front row. His face was a mask of granite, but his eyes were alive, calculating. The pieces were falling into place. He gave his assistant a nearly imperceptible nod, a silent order. The hunt had begun. The 2 days after the wedding were a study in silence. I did not leave the house. I did not answer the calls from concerned friends who must have heard the rumors. I moved through the quiet rooms of my home with a newfound purpose, the fiery grief having cooled into something far more useful: patience. I had planted a seed in the rich, dark soil of Charles Caldwell's suspicion. Now, all I had to do was wait for it to bear fruit. A man like him doesn't just ask questions, he dispatches armies of lawyers and accountants. I knew they would be making quiet inquiries, putting pressure on the vendors, scrutinizing every invoice. I knew that the perfect facade of Lydia's wedding was beginning to crack under the weight of a single anonymous email. I was waiting for the panic, and I knew it would come in the form of a phone call. She called asking for money. I gave her just enough rope. On the third afternoon, it happened. My phone vibrated on the polished surface of my desk. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in years, a ghost from Lydia's past, Monica. I took a slow, deliberate breath. I opened the voice recording app on my phone, its simple red button glowing like a single predatory eye. I checked the microphone levels. I let the phone vibrate a second, then a third time before answering. My voice, when I spoke, was perfectly calm. "Hello, Monica." "Vivian, darling." Her voice was a cascade of warm honey and sharp, glittering glass. "I am so glad I reached you. I've been worried sick. We were all devastated when we heard you weren't feeling well. I let the lie hang in the air between us. I'm fine, Monica," I said. Just 4 words. Let her do the work. Let her build her own cage. "Oh, good. That's wonderful." A slight pause. The honey was gone now, replaced by a practiced urgency. "Listen, Vivian, there's been a bit of a dreadful mix-up with the caterers and the venue. Some final invoices were sent to the wrong address. It's all terribly confusing. Charles's people are being rather meticulous." She laughed, a sound like tearing silk. "You know how these corporate types are." I said nothing. I listened to the sound of her breathing, the subtle panic tightening her voice. She spoke of Lydia's happiness, but her words were laced with the terror of a gambler whose credit line was about to be cut. "The point is," she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "we need to settle the final balance to close everything out, and Lydia is just so overwhelmed with everything, the poor darling. It would be a tremendous help if you could authorize one last transfer from the trust, just to smooth things over." I looked out the window at my garden. A hummingbird, a tiny jewel of iridescent green, hovered at the feeder. It was so beautiful, so fragile. "What's the amount, Monica?" I asked, my tone flat, neutral. She rattled off a number, a significant one. The final piece of my life savings, repurposed to pay for a party I was barred from. She explained it was for incidentals, for vendor overages. It was a lie, and we both knew it. This was the money she and Lydia had planned to pocket after all the bills were paid, the prize at the bottom of the box. Her greed was a weapon, and she was aiming it at herself. "I see," I said after a long moment of silence. "And you need this done immediately?" "Yes, darling, if you could," she said, relief flooding her voice. "It would mean the world to Lydia. She sends all her love, of course. She's just been emotional." Emotional. That was the word she chose. "All right, Monica," I said, the words tasting like metal in my mouth. "I'll authorize the transfer this afternoon." The gratitude she performed was obscene. A flood of thank yous and blessings and promises for a lunch we both knew would never happen. I listened. I agreed. I disconnected. The line went dead. The silence returned, but this time it felt different. It was the silence of a trap that had just been sprung. My thumb moved with slow precision across the screen. I tapped the red button. A small notification appeared. Recording saved. File name, trx_final_payment.mp3. I attached the file to a new empty email. The recipient was Charles Caldwell's personal assistant. The subject line was simple: regarding your inquiry. I didn't need to be in that room. I had already pictured it 100 times, had directed the scene in my mind until every detail was perfect. The suffocating quiet of a corporate conference room, the scent of expensive leather and fear, the precise way the afternoon light would cut across the long mahogany table, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, silent witnesses. The call came at 2 p.m., exactly as planned. My phone buzzed once. The name on the screen was simple: Charles Caldwell. I answered. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It was the voice of a man who moved markets and ended careers with a single, quiet word. "Vivian," he said. The sound was like ice cracking. "It's time." I simply said, "I know," and disconnected the call. The board was set. The pieces were in place. The reckoning had begun. I imagined my daughter, Lydia, sitting beside her mother, Monica. They would have been escorted there, not invited. Lydia would be pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her designer dress looking like a costume for a part she had forgotten how to play. Monica, on the other hand, would be radiating indignation, a cornered animal preparing to fight. Across from them, Charles Caldwell would be sitting perfectly still, his son beside him looking lost and betrayed. This was not a family discussion. This was a post-mortem, a damage assessment. Charles would have started calmly, laying out the first report from his accountants like a surgeon laying out his tools. He would have spoken of the wedding vendors, of invoices paid directly from a trust fund she had no legal right to control. He would have mentioned the sheer scale of the spending, a small fortune spent to create a fantasy. And then I imagined Monica's voice, sharp and defensive, trying to weave a new story. "It was a gift, Charles." Vivian was always extravagantly generous. She wanted Lydia to have the world, a desperate attempt to paint me as a doting, slightly foolish benefactor. She's always been a bit emotional, prone to dramatics. Her absence was a last-minute attempt to make the day about her. I could almost hear the quiet scrape of Charles's chair as he leaned forward. "Emotional?" he would have said, his voice dangerously soft. "That's not what my team found." They found premeditation. He would slide a piece of paper across the table. The receipt. "This is an invoice from the wedding consultant, dated October 26th. My team found that the final disbursement from the Harper Trust was made on October 25th. 1 business day. It looks less like a gift and more like a carefully timed withdrawal. The truth arrived. The wedding was over. Monica, cornered, would have lashed out. Slander. Lies. A jealous, unstable woman trying to poison their new family. She would have built a wall of words, frantic and high-pitched, and that's when Charles would have played his final card. "Vivian couldn't be here today," I pictured him saying, his voice dropping, commanding the absolute attention of the room, "but she sends her regards." He would nod to his assistant. A small, sleek audio speaker would be placed in the center of the table. A soft click. And then Monica's own voice would fill the silence. The recording, the saccharine sweetness of her tone, dripping with false concern. "Vivian, darling, a dreadful mix-up. Authorize one last transfer." It would mean the world to Lydia. Every word was a nail in her coffin. Each fake term of endearment, each carefully crafted lie, now exposed in the cold, sterile air of that conference room. The recording would end. The silence that followed would be absolute, crushing. I imagined Lydia. She had been a statue this whole time, letting her mother fight the battle. But now, in that terrible silence, the last of her defenses would crumble. Her hands, which had been clenched in her lap, would begin to tremble. The beautiful, expensive Mont Blanc pen I had given her, the one she always carried, would slip through her numb fingers. It would clatter onto the mahogany table. The sound, small and sharp, would be the only sound in the world. The sound of a future breaking. The sound of a debt being paid in full. There was no celebration after the fall. There was only silence. A week after the confrontation, a small, heavy package arrived by courier. No return address, but I knew who it was from. Inside, nestled in a bed of silk, was the Mont Blanc pen, a final, quiet gesture from Charles Caldwell, a trophy from a war I had won, but one that left no victors, only survivors. I placed it on my desk, and for months it sat there untouched. A cold, black monument to a painful chapter. The phone would ring sometimes. Lydia's name would flash on the screen. I never answered. The silence that had once been my weapon had now become my sanctuary, a quiet space where I could finally begin to hear my own thoughts again. The boxes of her life remained stacked in the living room, sealed with tape. A life packed away. A ghost I was not yet ready to face. My greatest return was not on my investment. It was on myself. One morning, the sun streamed into my study, illuminating the dust motes dancing over the dark wood of my desk. My eyes fell on the pen. For the first time, looking at it, I didn't feel the sting of betrayal. I didn't feel the cold satisfaction of revenge. I felt nothing. It was just an object, a tool. Its purpose had been served. And I decided then it would serve one last purpose, not of destruction, but of creation. I uncapped it. I took out a fresh sheet of paper. I began to write. The words that flowed from that pen were not of anger or sorrow. They were words of purpose, charter, bylaws, mission statement. I spent the next 6 months dismantling the trust fund, not with fury, but with the precision of an architect. I met with lawyers, with financial planners, with women who had built charities from the ground up. I listened. I learned. I planned. The money, once a source of such profound pain, was being purified, transformed. It was no longer a weapon tainted with transactional love. It was becoming a foundation, a shield for others. The day we opened the doors to the Vivian Foundation, the office was filled with light. It was a modest space, warm and welcoming. We had a small staff, a clear mission to provide grants and support for single adoptive mothers, to be the safety net for women who, like me, had chosen to build a family on love alone. That afternoon, after the last of the board members had left, I returned home. I walked to the stack of sealed boxes in the living room. My hands were steady as I cut the tape on the one labeled Early Years. I didn't feel fear, just a quiet curiosity. I reached inside and pulled out a single, faded photograph. Lydia, age 5, on her first day of school. I was carrying her on my back, her small arms wrapped tightly around my neck, her face buried in my hair. You couldn't see her expression, but you could see mine. A smile of pure, unburdened joy. The fierce, protective love of a mother. I looked at the woman in the photo, that younger version of myself, and I didn't feel pity. I felt a gentle sense of gratitude. She had done her best. I took the photograph and a small, plain card. I wrote a single line on it, then slid both into an envelope. I addressed it to Lydia. It was not an invitation for reconciliation. It was a final lesson, a release. Back at the foundation office, I placed a framed copy of that same picture on my new desk. It was surrounded not by ghosts, but by plans for the future, by files filled with the names of women we could help. The picture no longer represented a painful past. It was a reminder of the mission, a testament to a love that endures, even after it is broken. Love is a presence, not an investment. Thank you for holding space for this story today. Everyone has a family story that shapes them, and if you feel comfortable sharing a piece of yours, I would be honored to read it in the comments. And of course, subscribing ensures you'll be here with us for the next one.